Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your mowers have practically built themselves.
Dog Merv. Welcome to today's show. On this installment of Echoes from the Chalkboard, we're going to be looking at the old Bonneville school that was in the North Salt Lake part of Salt Lake City. This beautiful picture here that I fortunately have of it. This building was built in 1890 and it sat on the northwest corner of Chicago and Duluth Street in North Salt Lake, an area that we also refer to as Swede Town. And you've heard of that in some of my other videos. The two-room building was 1,188 square feet, and it sat on approximately 0.54 acres of land. In the early 1920s, this site was sold to the railroad for expansion of their right-of-way. A portable was erected 2 blocks to the east and 1 block to the south at 8th West and 1450 North. You can see here in this Sanborn Fire Insurance map on the far left-hand side 3 buildings. The Bonneville School on the corner of Duluth and Chicago, the 23rd Ward Auxiliary Hall, I think is what it says, and some other building. Now from that black line all the way to the right, just ignore that, because the way the map is drawn, that part of the map should actually be on top of those other 3 buildings. So at the time, this is how it was drawn, and it gives you a good idea of where it sat on the plot. Here's a close-up of that, and you can see the measurements of the building. Also, it was 140 feet to the OSL Oregon Short Line main track. Heat was hot air. Well, that goes to figure. And there were no lights. Quite interesting. So in this picture, you get to see the classrooms. It looks like it's 25 foot approximately. Anyway, the 2 classrooms. But what's interesting here is that you go into the lobby, there's a cloakroom on each side for each classroom. I found that very, very interesting, something you don't see much anymore. In this picture, these kids standing out front of the school, I can imagine looking in those front windows and seeing the cloakrooms. Really a neat picture to have. So the building was eventually torn down because, well, they needed more right-of-way for the railroad. This is taken about 15 years ago of the area where the school once sat. And since then, they've put more garbage and stuff there. So this is the temporary portable that was put a few blocks away. And this was in the early 1920s. This, I gotta think, is from the 1930s. But this picture is from the early 1960s of that same building. And it was used, as far as I know, as an annex for the Washington School up into the 1960s, early 1960s. But here's a great picture of that particular building. It was 1,700 square feet, a little over 1,700 square feet. Looking from the north, or to the north, you can see on the right-hand side the plot of land for the portable. But on the left, there's a very interesting building that we will talk about here in a minute. And then to the east, you have this view. So that building I said was very interesting. It's the old 23rd Ward schoolhouse, or not schoolhouse, sorry, the old 23rd Ward house. And it is still standing. It was built in the very early 1900s. I don't have the exact year, but you can see what a beautiful building it is. And it still stands there to this day. And not much else in Swede Town, a few homes. Speaking of which, about 300 yards south of where the school sat was this little house, and this was also kind of at the end of the street where the church was. This belonged to my great grandfather, and I think you may have seen that show before where I talk about investigating and looking, well, here is my grandfather. This picture was taken in 1919, to give you some perspective. So the school was still in operation, and over his shoulder to the right and out of the picture is where the church was. So in this particular map, overhead you can see the yellow circle is where the school used to be, at the corner of Duluth and Chicago. The red is where they moved to. The blue is the church, and then the one at the bottom is the green one is my great grandfather's home, which still stands. So kind of a neat, for those folks who are local here and have ever been out to Swede Town, kind of a neat idea of where everything was. So, hey, thanks for joining us, folks, and we'll talk to you again soon.